Hello everybody, welcome back as I continue my look at the recent Spider-Man themed Marvel Legends wave. And today I'm going to be turning my attention to one of the characters that I'm not as familiar with. It's a Spider-Man variant, it is Spider-Shot. I've got to be honest, I don't know the history or the relevancy of this character. As I've said before, I'm not really up to date with modern Spider-Man comics. I'm many years behind at this point. So I don't recognise this, so I can't really vouch for the character, and I had zero expectations. So if we take a look at the packaging, we can see that this is very similar to the Hallows Eve packaging. Well, in fact, it's actually identical, and we've seen this on several other releases in the past as well. It is the Spider-Man logo, which looks nice and colourful, to be fair. It's a slightly different font to some of the other figures in this wave, which is much more themed after the Spider-Man animated series. And we have some spiderweb design and some nice colours running through this, which makes it fairly attractive. We have this nice illustrated image here, which I think is taken directly from the source material in the comic books, and this looks pretty attractive, and I think it works pretty well. It's not the most exciting packaging in the world, but it's pretty nice. It's pretty displayable. You can put this on a hook and you can hang it on your wall. And if we flip it, we can see that on the reverse of the packaging, we have a really nice photograph here. Perhaps it's a digital rendering, actually, of the action figure itself, looking pretty cool. And behind it, we have that self-same image that we saw on the front of the packaging, but enlarged slightly and blued out. But this is really attractive. I think they've done a nice job with mixing and matching all the colours here. They're complementary and, you know, it's quite visually arresting. So I think they've done a good job with the presentation here. There's a lot of small print, and there's a little bit of bio about the character as well, which is quite cool. And yeah, this looks pretty good. Now, looking at the figure itself, I have to say I was a little bit underwhelmed. This is quite a muted colour scheme on this figure. I'm pretty sure that's accurate to what we see in the comics, but it makes the figure feel a little bit dull on first impression. But if we take a look at this head sculpt, I think this actually is a new head sculpt. I don't recall seeing this before, but we've had many different Spider-Man variants across the years. But this looks new to me, but there's just not an awful lot going on in it. Obviously, we just have the base plastic for the red of the mask, and then we just have, again, a base plastic for the black of the eyes. There's no paint wash running through this, and there's not really much in the way of detail in the sculpting, apart from we can see a bit of a furrowed brow there, and that's really it. He certainly looks a bit mean, which is, I think, a good thing, but there's not much else to really talk about here. If we look at the body sculpt, again, there's nothing really new here. We've seen this before on other Spider-Man figures. I think this looks fine. There's nothing really sculpted into this body. Everything's sort of painted on in terms of all that detailing. And even the pouches there that have been sculpted in, I feel like these have been used from a Captain America figure at some point. I'm not quite sure, but I definitely feel like I've seen this before. At any rate, this doesn't feel particularly fresh or original, and I have to note as well that there's a very rubbery texture to this figure, which we sometimes get with Marvel Legends, and it feels like they're cheaping out on some of the materials. And I always feel slightly queasy when you get ones like this, because it feels like their joints can just tear off. The one thing that is new, and I believe is sculpted specifically for this figure, is these pointed hands. I think these look really cool. There's actually a little peg in there where we can put the sort of blast effect, which we'll see a little bit later, and I think these look quite striking actually. But again, if we turn our attention to the legs and the feet, we can see that this is just recycled from other figures. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but they're just quite bland. There's no paint apps on this figure really, hardly at all, and there's certainly no washes or detailing to really be drawn on. So, taking a look at the articulation, there's a ball joint at the top of the neck there, so the head can spin all the way around, it can sort of wobble left and right, and it can look up and down, very similar to the Scarlet Spider. There is the butterfly joint, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I love this joint. It's got the ball joint there in the shoulder as well, which is great. Complementary bicep swivel, double pin at the elbow there, so the hand can go all the way back, and we have a pin swivel at the wrist, allowing the hand to rotate 360 degrees and hinge forwards and backwards. We then have the same ball joint in the top of the torso here, allowing the figure to move from side to side and lean left and right. And he can also bend forwards and backwards, and there's actually a helpful ab crunch here as well to really maximise the posability here. There's more ball joints in the hips, of course. The legs will kick out to the side, there's the thigh swivel at the top there, the leg will kick forwards and backwards, and there is another double joint at the knee, so that lower leg will kick all the way back, and we also have that swivel at the top of the boot cut there, which is great. And finally we have an ankle rocker as well, so that foot will hinge forwards and backwards, but also rock from side to side. In terms of accessories, there's not really much that's very exciting here. He comes with an additional 2 pairs of hands, a couple of flipping hands, and a couple of fists, which, you know, good stuff, but we've had that several times in this wave already. And we also have this sort of Venom blast effect, which I think is cool and feels unique to this character, which is good. Now, There's enough here to create a couple of different looks of the character, but as I said, the character feels a little bit dull and a little bit underwhelming in terms of its paint apps, so it never looks particularly striking in my opinion. But these blast effects are kind of cool. They add a little bit of splash of colour, and as I said, having those pointed hands actually give him a very different edge to some of the other Spider-Man figures we have in our pretty expansive Spider-Man collection by this point. The only criticism I have with these blasters is that the one on the left always looks to be jutting out at a slight angle, so it doesn't look natural, like he's really firing it from his wrist. But you know, beggars can't be choosers, I suppose. All in all, I'm just going to give this figure 2 stars. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but there's just something incredibly dull about the figure. A lot of that is down to the paint apps, which isn't the figure's fault. Obviously that's based on the source material, but there's just something a little bit lacking in this costume. There's nothing that feels particularly exciting in figure form apart from those sort of blast effects, but so minimal, and it just feels a little bit lacking really. I'm not sure if they could have done an alternate head or something a bit more exciting in that region, but as it is, it just feels a little bit underwhelming and a little bit bland. To be honest, I think this one's really only for die-hard fans or people who just love having Spider-Man variants in the collection and want to build out their Spider-Verse. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.